right. Welcome to the Inclusion Solution Live podcast from the Winters Group. On this season of our podcast, we'll be taking a deeper intentional dive into the chapters of the Winters Group's new book, Racial Justice at Work, Practical Solutions for Systemic Change. I'm Gabby Gonzalez, Marketing and PR Strategist here at the Winters Group, and I'm thrilled to be here with our co-hosting with our founder and CEO, Mary Frances Winters.
Hey, Gabby, it's good to be with you again today. And hey, Celeste, thank you so much for agreeing to join us today on this podcast. Yeah, we wrote the book, Racial Justice at Work, Practical Solutions for Systemic Change, because we hear so often from our clients that we really don't know what to do. How do we actually make this practical? And particularly when we talk about racial justice. And so this book is designed to do that and to look at systems that go beyond HR. But today we are going to be talking about how those systems, how the HR systems actually play a key role. And we have an expert in that area today. And again, I am just so grateful, Celeste Warren, that you, and we were going to introduce you in just a moment, but I just wanted to share my gratitude that you said yes when I asked you to be a part of our podcast. So thank you so much.
Love it. So yeah, I mean, sounds like you're checking in very grateful.
Yes, I'm checking in today grateful.
That's great.
And how about you, Gabby?
Oh, yes, me as well. Always excited. And I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about my chapter today. So it's recruiting, hiring, and other HR practices for racial justice. And the reason why we brought in Celeste today. So we have Celeste Warren, Vice President of Merck's Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence. I'm going to pivot to you, Mary Frances, to take it from there. I know you two have been friends for quite a while.
We have known each other for quite a while. And Merck does happen to be one of our wonderful clients. We've done work over the years with Celeste and the Center of Excellence, and very, they're doing a great job, and that's why we asked you to be a part of it. So how are you checking in with us today, Celeste?
I'm doing well. I am so honored to be a part of your podcast, Mary Frances. This is a long time coming for you. You have the books, you have the organization where you reach out through all of your channels, but this podcast, I'm really excited to be a part of.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you, how you got into this work, why you're in this work, what inspires you about this work, what some of the challenges of this work might be, but just tell us more about you so our audience can hear a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Well, sure. As Gabby said, I lead Merck's Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence. I've been doing this specific job for 9 years. This is my 9th year going into it. And been at Merck this is my 26th year. And this is just something, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that I say this all the time, I was born with. My father was the first Black teacher and first Black principal in Western Pennsylvania. And also that right near the Ohio line. So Youngstown, Ohio, et cetera. And so I had a front row seat to being able to see the challenges that he faced being the only and the first, and how he overcame some of them and how he dealt with them. And, our dinner table was constantly, the conversation was what was going on? How was his day? What did he have to face? And so hearing from him directly with those challenges, it was ingrained in me. It was a part of my childhood. And then growing up at high school and in college and being able to have more adult type conversations with my father before he passed away, I was able to just kind of understand the challenges and then how to really look at it from a perspective of, I call it sort of like the Jackie Robinson thinking, where as the first, all eyes are on you and everyone's waiting for you to do something wrong, to get in trouble, to do whatever. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. And that pressure was on him for many, many years until the second Black teacher came in, or the third, et cetera. And it's not unlike that when we think about the roles that we play in corporate America. When all eyes are on you, they're just looking to see, is she going to make a mistake? Is she going to do this? And so that's a lot of pressure. And so we know that. And that's why, the chapter, when I read the chapter around HR practices and what the important role that we have to do within human resources and the people, practices, policies, and procedures. It was it was a good chapter. I really enjoyed reading it. And you're right, they're practical solutions. Practical. I couldn't put it down after that. I was like, okay, let's go to the next one. So very, very well written. And it's very, very important. The points that you bring up, it's very, very important. So for me, it's just been ingrained. Whatever job I had, even before formally being the head of diversity and inclusion for this organization, it's always been a part of how I did my job, how I looked at any organization I was supporting as a human resources professional, whether this company or previous companies. It's just been a part of me and a desire to make sure that I'm speaking for the voices of the employees who are underrepresented, underserved, and making sure that I'm able to put things in play that are going to enable a much more equitable workplace. So that's kind of what gets me going. And yeah, there are lots of times where you want to come home and kick the dog and it's just, you have those frustrating days. And these days, it's in the headlines. So we can talk more about that later on. But that's kind of what gets me going.
Oh, that's really great. And you speak to your lived experiences, right? And I know, Gabby, for you in writing that chapter, right? Some of the reason why you wrote that chapter is because of your lived experience. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about why you wrote that, why you wanted to write that chapter?
Absolutely. So I was connecting a lot to what you were saying, Celeste, as far as like your lived experience and seeing your dad being, the first and or the only. This reminds me of, I do share some experiences in the book. I'll make this a little more exclusive, talk a little bit more about a different experience from earlier in my career. As a young magazine editor at Shape magazine, I was the only, editor of color on staff as far as like being an articles editor. And, at the time it was very eye-opening for me because this is right after I moved to Los Angeles from Columbus, Ohio. And really realizing like how much more diverse, it really is out there. And just realizing growing up, I read Shape magazine. My brother was a big, fitness enthusiast, was very into Muscle and Fitness magazine, which is like a sister publication. And so it was like, for me at the time, I'm like, oh, cool. This is a magazine I read growing up. But then realizing, having access to all the archives, I'm like, there really has not been a lot of diversity here. And, being able to be in a position where I could do something about that, where I could say, hey, can we feature a different, photo here or, just covering different stories. That was like sort of my first time really being able to feel like I could make a difference in what was, being put out there. And, as a result, we were able to start featuring more, women of color in the magazine. And we also, we hired our first Black columnist, which I was very proud of, which, at the time I was like, how is this the first time that we've hired a Black columnist? So again, very eye-opening and the difference it can be made by being able to be in a position where you can speak up and speak out. So then, that really inspired, my work going into diversity, equity, inclusion, and also just, it was like the basis for all of my experiences going into writing this chapter.
Yeah. And when just hearing the both of you talk about the importance of HR to have those sensibilities and to have, so it's not just about the policies, right? It's really about understanding sometimes what's underneath those policies and how those policies might impact people, differently. So Celeste, when you hear the term racial justice, from your perspective, what does that mean?
From my perspective, it used to be going all the way back to 1964 and civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and all of the memories from seeing the historical aspect of that. But when you fast forward to 2023 today, racial justice is about, for me, trying to right the inequities or right the ship, if you will, the inequities that exist in corporate America, in the public sector, in education and institutions. It's trying to right the ship. And there's a lot of years, decades, centuries of inequities that have been institutionalized into a lot of different systems and organizations and institutions, et cetera, that we have to really do a lot of work. And it's not going to happen through osmosis. And a lot of people they truly don't understand. And sometimes it can be overwhelming understanding that when our forefathers wrote the Constitution, the slavery was legal.
Right.
And so there were so many things that were going on that are just ingrained into our laws, again, the public sector, the private sector, and we have to sort of unpack all of that to really get at how do we right this ship? How do we create equity so we can make sure that all of the isms, the racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, all of those different isms that exist that are just kind of woven into the fabric of a lot of these institutions, that we have to pull that back and look at it, examine it, and then tear it out. And it starts with you have to. It's got to be a multi-pronged approach, and that's kind of how I view it. It's not an easy answer. This didn't happen yesterday. It's been long times of practices and procedures and policies and laws that we have to really get after. And it's hard work. It's not for the faint of heart. All of us will tell people that, they come up to us and they say, "Oh, I'm so passionate about diversity and inclusion. What can I do? And I want to do this and I want to do that." And then when you start really having those conversations with them, they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do this."
Exactly. I mean, it's such hard work. And I always feel like, I'm constantly having to prove myself. I'm constantly having to back up what I see with statistics and data. And I'm just curious if you've, if that's been the case for you too.
Yeah. I think at least within our organization, I think Ken laying the groundwork, Ken Frazier laying the groundwork and helping people to see beyond the business case for diversity within our organization. I think I hope that conversations, and at least in most of the Fortune 500 organizations, that we've sort of gone beyond that and really looking at, we know that there's a business case for it. We know that it creates a competitive advantage. Now, how do we get in there and do it? And, we saw in 2020, in May, in the murder of George Floyd, that we saw the statements of solidarity all over social media. And that was great because you didn't see that in the past. You didn't see it for Trayvon Martin. You didn't see it for Michael Brown. You didn't even see it for Breonna Taylor until after George Floyd. But, that's great. We love the statements of solidarity, but it's what are you doing what are the actions that are taking place within your respective organizations to get after these issues? And now that you've been sort of awakened to different inequities, if that's the case, then what are you doing to get at it and fight for what needs to happen within your organization? And I was having conversations with our executive team last year and just this week around we can give you the skills and capabilities, but it is a large part of it is the courage of your conviction. A large part of it is prioritization. A large part of it is putting your money where your mouth is. And when I was growing up, I can't remember, I heard a pastor speak and he was saying that if you really want to know where someone's loyalties lie, look in your checkbook and see who are you writing checks to? Is it he used to say back in the day, Sears and J.C. Penney's and Macy's, or is it your church? Is it nonprofit organizations? Is it what are you doing to help the world be a better place? And I think that's true for today with corporations. Where are you spending your resources? And that's a big part of it. How much spend do you have with diverse suppliers, around the globe, as an example? And how are you looking at, in our space, getting diversity through clinical trials? What do your senior levels of the organization look like from a representation standpoint? There's so many different things to incorporate it in throughout your people, your culture, your business, and the things that you're doing to make the world a better place that That's all of the things that need to happen. And a lot of people, they think that they just scrape the top, and you can't do that. That's just, that's just window dressing. You have to really get at what's underneath all of that and really attack it.
And so that's going to be my next question for you in terms of what are you all doing to get underneath and to attack it. But before I do that, I just want to, for our audience, because some people may not know who Ken Frazier is.
Yeah, Ken was our chief executive officer, our CEO of Merck, the first CEO of a major pharmaceutical company in the world. And he was our
first
CEO.
First black,
yes, Black CEO, and one of few in the Fortune 500. And just made a lot of headway. He was our CEO for 11 years, and then he moved on after he retired and turned the helm over to Rob Davis, our current CEO. He then was the executive chair of our board. And since then, the end of this past year, he's now even retired from that. So, but yeah, we still have contact with them through other areas and ventures. But yeah, he really did some fabulous things, not just within Merck, but also as a leader externally. When many of you might know, he left then President Trump's manufacturing council after the events in Charlottesville. That was a sort of a come to Jesus moment, because people were looking at that and saying, "Wow, he's really stood up for something and against, the leader of the free country, the biggest free country in the world." So these are he laid the groundwork and really provided a lot of air coverage for me, because what we're doing is it's organizational change. If you don't understand how to methodically do organizational change, then you're going to have a hard time in these types of roles. You have to look at the organization, you have to do your assessment, understand where the pain points are, understand where the issues are, and really go after it with either enterprise-wide programs and initiatives, interventions, solutions to get after the problem areas within an organization. And people don't necessarily, as you guys know, they don't necessarily want to be characterized as not understanding racial inequities and racial injustice. And you're talking about things that they heard at the dinner table growing up from mom and dad and auntie and grandpa and grandma, that they, as a child, that's what they heard. And so it's a tightrope that we walk on to try to change beliefs and understanding, and help them to understand where we are now, how those inequities and those racial injustices, how they manifest themselves in the organization, and what needs to happen in order for us to really make change. It is a tightrope that we walk on in trying to do this, but it has to be done.
Do you have an example of a success in this area? What would you give us? What would you give the listeners as something that, practical, that they can actually go and do, that you all have done at Merck that's moved the needle?
Some of the things that we've done most recently with the start of 110, which Ken Frazier was one of the founders of that. But 110 is an organization that was started 2 years ago, and it's basically really leading the way in having 1 million Black individuals having jobs, sustaining jobs within corporate America. And it's basically to create those jobs and get 1 million Black African Americans hired into these roles by in the next 10 years. And that's basically kind of what the organization and their mission is. And Ken and Ginny Romanetti from IBM were the ones that and Ken Shinnok from American Express, the previous CEO there, were the ones that started this idea, and then vision, and then organization. And Maurice Jones is the CEO now. we did an inventory, first of all, before 110, we did an inventory of the language that's used in job postings, and really took it through a tool to really see, are we using inclusive language? Is the language and the communications and how it's written, is it already inequitable, and is it causing unnecessary barriers to women and persons of color and other underrepresented groups to even want to post for the job, both internally and externally? And so there was that piece of it. And then when we joined 110, really taking a look at our roles and saying, is a 4-year degree really necessary? And we know with all of the data and the research that becomes a barrier, an obstacle to, especially in the Black and Latino and Hispanic community, of being an arbitrary barrier for certain roles. And so we did an inventory of roles around from our sales roles, some of our in our research organization, certainly our shared services, some of our human resources roles, and really took a look at them and said, okay, really, do we need it? It's really about the skills and the capabilities and the experiences that people and the candidates have. So these are the things that's just one example of some of the things that you can do, is really look at your recruiting practices. Another thing is, going back decades, but having diverse candidate slates. You'd think, wow, you can't hire diversity if you don't have candidate slates that are diverse. And what we started doing is also not just looking at the end number, but looking all the way through the candidate selection process and looking at the data. So from resume to phone screen to interview to hire, what does it look like? The data from a representation standpoint, and really tracking that as well. And really, because you really get at where the pain points are, bottlenecks in the candidate process. So those are just a couple of things just recently that we have put into play. And I tell you, the skills first has really made a difference in our talent processes, because it has opened the doors to a wealth of talent that previously we had been shutting out just arbitrarily.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have had such great success with removing barriers. I'm curious if you had to experience any, or if you experienced any resistance along the way.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be resistance, and I use that analogy of that illustration where everybody's seen it, where the individuals are on each of them are standing on one rock and they're looking over the fence, trying to look over the fence. The person on the right still can't see over the fence. Person in the middle barely. Person on the left can. And then you go to the second illustration where you've given them, the person on the right 3 rocks, the person in the middle 2 rocks, the person on the left still has the 1 rock. And what is happening now is the work that we're doing in racial justice and in creating equity is causing disruption in the organization, because now that person that was standing on 1 rock in the first illustration and 1 rock in the middle illustration, they're looking to their right and they're saying, well, how come they have 3 rocks and they have 2 rocks and I just have 1? And they don't understand that fence is there. And in the analogy that I've used, that fence represents those isms: racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia. It represents the institutionalized isms that exist. They've always been able to see over with that 1 rock, and they don't understand what that looked like in the eyes of the person to the right, to the persons to the right. So having that discussion with them to say, well, we have to put these in place, because they're asking questions like, well, why do we have employee resource groups and affinity groups? Why do we need them? Why do we have to have diverse sourcing strategies? Why do we have a women's leadership program? They're asking these questions, and thanks to from 2016 and beyond, they feel like they can they can elevate their voice and say that, right? There's nothing wrong with me questioning D and I. There's nothing wrong with me doing that. And so we know what happened in November of 2016. And so that has kind of opened this gateway. And so they don't, where they were sort of, covert with it, they just stick their head out like, like a whack-a-mole. And they basically stick their head up and they say, well, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And some of my colleagues have said, that used to be a career limiting move for you to go against, at least, publicly say these things. And now it's not. And I look at it as, okay, now I understand. I don't have to dig through and try to figure out what you're thinking. If you say it, then I know, and let's have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep. And you have a book that you can hand them now too. So
and it can be a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation that we need to have. And so I have to explain to them that the fence is there, those isms exist. You've always been able to see over the fence because you've lived this wonderful life of privilege. But the person to the right and the person in the middle, they haven't been able to see the fence. And this is what this has looked like for them. And helping them to understand that. And then not just an understanding, but they get it intellectually, but I need them to be active allies. I need them to get on the boat, get in the boat, grab an oar and row with us as we're trying to get up the stream. And that's kind of what we're seeing, that disruption. And so it manifests itself in so many different ways. Oh, well, the question that we always get, when our recruiters, when they say, well, we want to make sure that we're giving you a diverse candidate slate. And then the hiring manager, the next thing out of their mouth is, well, I want to make sure that I have quality candidates. And so when I get involved in that conversation, I just basically say, okay, well, wait a minute. Why did you feel the need to even say that? And I said, close your eyes. I said, I want you to visualize for me what the best candidate looks like. What do they look like? Describe them to me. Because when I close my eyes and I do it, it's a woman of color. What does it look like for you? And, just to challenge their thinking and help them to understand that the reason why you said that, let's cut to the chase, is because you believe that diverse talent is inferior, that they don't have the skills, they don't have the capabilities, they don't have the intelligence. That's why you felt the need to say that. And you have to change your mindset. And so, these are the types of conversations that we have to have in order to do that, because they, these folks are not being quiet anymore. And you see it in the public sector. Look what DeSantis is doing in Florida, in Texas. It's just the governor in Virginia. It's just it's sad, and it is so sad that this is going on in 2023. Trying to stop AP African American Studies. It's just it is unbelievable that this is where we are this day and age. And so the fight is real, the struggle is real, and if we don't speak up and we don't elevate our voices, there's going to be some tragedies going to be happening in the United States, and other countries are looking at us and saying, okay, look what's going on. Look, they're looking at us, and we don't want the same atrocities to be happening across the globe.
Right. This is why we wanted to have you on, Celeste, because we know that you work for an organization where even you being on this podcast and saying what you said today, there would be other people from other organizations who wouldn't even be allowed to do that. So to be able to so poignantly and eloquently, speak to what the issues are and what you're doing in the organizations, and to get at the root cause. It does, to get under those roots. That's why I'm doing this, under those roots. It really does take that examination and peeling back that onion and doing that reverse engineering and looking at what is in this system, that is causing this outcome. And so thank you so much for sharing, some of the things that you're doing at Merck to do that. And they're so fortunate to have you as a leader there, to be able to impact other leaders who may not see the world the same way. I love your analogies and your metaphors. And I think that's those stories and those metaphors really help people as well. So we know that this work is challenging and exhausting and fatiguing. I wrote that book too, right? Black Fatigue. But how do you do? What do you do to refill your cup? What do you do to manage and to, just deal with, as you mentioned, these immense challenges we find ourselves having today?
Well, first thing is I'm a woman of faith, so that is really important for me. The second thing is sometimes I just have to turn it off. I'll be scrolling on LinkedIn or other social, Twitter or something, and I just have to sometimes turn it off. And sort of just my guilty pleasure is I watch murder mysteries on TV. and I literally, I say, you know what, I can't do this. Sometimes I can't even watch the news. And I just I turn on Netflix or something. And I totally sort of disengage for a few hours. That's, I can't do it for a long period of time because the battle is raging, but that's my sort of that's kind of what I do, and I'm finding that this issue, in the church. I just recently spoke to a combination of churches across different denominations around social justice. A lot of churches have these committees around social justice in their churches, and so I just Tuesday evening last week. Spoke to a combination of different churches around social justice and talking about it, and just did a Q&A. So this isn't something that's just in corporate America. I've talked with universities. I was at Carnegie Mellon this past weekend, my alma mater, talking to not the liberal arts school, but the Tepper School of Business, because they're understanding the importance in creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. And they're integrating it into their studies. And it's not just about accounting and economics and statistics and all of that. But if you truly want to be a successful leader in corporate America, you have to understand the importance of inclusion and equity in the environment and how that plays into the organization. So, it is something that is permeating across different industries, different areas, different sectors, and you can't shut it off. And maybe I'm just getting too old, but I'm fearful of the future. I have a son who's 19 in college, a daughter who's 21 in college, and I don't want them to face some of the things that I've faced, as all of us have faced. Gabby, you talked about it. Mary, I know you and I have talked about it. I don't want them to face that. And so I'm trying to get them active in politics and making sure that they vote. I'm trying to get them to not make the same mistakes that I made when I was their age. I didn't care about this and I didn't care about, I don't think I voted until I was in my mid-20s. And so, my son is, as soon as he turned 18, he registered to vote through the school. And my daughter is very, very, active and very, very poignant about how she feels about certain things and inequities. And so, this generation, I'm praying that they keep on raising their voices and not putting up with things. And
absolutely doing what you can when you can.
Yeah. And you don't have to wait until you're 30, 40, 50 years old to be a leader. These guys, they're stepping out in their teens in high school and stepping out and speaking up on things. And we need them to continue to do that and not lose that fire, because, let's pray that some of these folks, they'll leave politics and not be in those positions where they're making these laws and these decisions based on erroneous information and belief.
We have to continue this work. Yes, all the generations, we all have to do our part. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And keep writing books.
Absolutely. Yes. We're spreading those ideas out there. But yeah, so thank you, Celeste, for having us or for being with us. And thank you to the listeners for being with us. Mary Frances, are you going to take us out?
I will take us out, Celeste. Oh my gosh, this has been so amazing. Oh, I just want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, you put it down. I mean, you just gave us so much, to think about, and you went beyond just your job because it's the society, right? It's our kids, it's our legacies, it's our our grandkids and everybody who is impacted by where this world is going. And you're not only working in your organization, but you're working in the churches, and you're working in going back to your alma mater, and and so I do hope, and you shared with us some of the things that you do for self-care. And I want to remind our listeners as well that, because anybody who's listening to this, right, they're with us, right? And so you're listening to this, you're watching this, please do take good care of yourselves as well, because we're in culture wars right now, and it is extremely burdensome, difficult. There's a lot of stress and strain. So while we're fighting the good fight, let's also make sure that we take care of ourselves. And part of just taking care of ourselves can be to like reach out to somebody else who's like-minded, and you all just sort of be with each other, and just allow each other to just be and to just share. So being compassionate with other people, and taking care of each other. I think we've got to take care of ourselves, but we have to take care of each other. And Celeste, you have been so kind over the years to me and my fledgling company. So I want to thank you for being, part of my group, my inner circle of people that I know that I can count on for support. So we really appreciate you. Thank you for all that you're doing in the world, and hope to talk with you again soon.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I can't wait to hear future podcasts as well, and to read the rest of the book.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time, continue to reimagine racial justice at work.